The cover page of One Punch Man Chapter 196, titled Threat, features Murata's favorite character Fubuki just hanging out. Flashy Flash stepped up to Blast in the Hero Association's basement lair. The ninja hero was tired of the focus being on his disciple Saitama, and Saitama wasn't too happy to hear that. Flash insisted that the top hero tell him about God since he's been fighting it for a while now. After all, that's what he, Monaco, and Saitama came here to learn about. Blast remained stoic while looking at a determined Flashy Flash. Afterwards, he was blunt. He told the shinobi that if he planned on joining the fight, he should forget it. That someone like him would definitely die in the pursuit. Flash was not expecting that sort of response at all. Taken aback, he asked if Blast was calling him weak. Stammering a bit, Flash told his senior not to underestimate him just because the guy snuck up on him the first time they met. For the record, Blast did not sneak up on him. Back then, Blast recognized Flash as an S-Class hero, and he wondered what he was doing so far underground. Seeing him for the first time, Flash decided to find out if the legendary hero was the real deal. He rushed up at maximum speed and unleashed his Flash Kicks technique. Mid-motion, Blast appeared behind him and urged the guy to calm down a bit. In the present, Flash exclaimed that he wouldn't be satisfied until he gets the Litter God with slashes. Saitama wondered why that was. Flash admitted that it's a long story, and Saitama immediately took back his question. He really wasn't interested. But despite his protests, Saitama's self-appointed master continued anyways. After recently dealing with Galewind and Hellfire Flame yet again, Flash was able to piece together some of his memories from the ninja village. The village was the ultimate training ground for the highest caliber of assassins. It was located far in the mountains, and normal people were kept away thanks to the barrier around it. Flash distinctly remembers sneaking away from training with his friend to check out the underground levels, and it was there that they discovered an enshrined cube. This reminds me of when I first saw a GameCube as a kid. Some of you guys are probably too young for that reference. Flashy Flash realized that the outer design of the village itself had been modeled around this cube. In the original version, we were left to inference this, but now we had the correlation directly addressed. Furthermore, the two young ninjas found something sleeping inside of a recovery tank. Their eyes went wide at what they saw. It was the founder of the village, that man. He barely looked human, and this shot of him is definitely better than it was in the first version. Flash continued to say that if they assume that man was also empowered by God, everything begins to add up. To create and release the greatest assassins, the village subjected children to hellish training. As it turns out, the village was always an organization dedicated to God, the true intention being for them to produce minions for the creature. And again, the dialogue is far more direct this time around. Things that were mostly left up to context clues and inferences had been laid out very clearly. Flashy Flash wanted Blast to confirm his suspicions thus far. Blast took a moment to answer, but his stance remained the same. He sympathized with Flash, but even still, he could not accept his help. Again, Flashy Flash was completely thrown off. Blast continued by mentioning that man. He revealed that the village's founder's actual name is Empty Void. Not only that, but they were partners. Flash was stunned and waited for Blast to continue. Sitch was already aware of all this and simply closed his eyes solemnly. Blast admitted that Empty Void became one of God's minions during their search for the cubes. Bitterly, he also said that if he and Void hadn't failed, kids like Flashy Flash and the other ninjas wouldn't have had their lives stolen by the village. There also wouldn't be so many victims of assassination due to their exploits. This was a problem that he alone needed to take responsibility for. Flashy Flash took a second before sharply questioning if he was understanding things correctly. That the greatest hero's partner was used by the enemy, and he actually let the guy get away. Blast responded that that was a pretty harsh way of putting things. He added that back then, he and Empty Void were equal in their ability. But when he received power from God, Void gained a major advantage. However, Blast managed to give his partner a grave wound that he would need 15 years to recover from. Now that is crazy. For Empty Void to be on par with Blast at base is something we did not know at all before. This do-over is giving us some major heat, and we haven't even gotten to the really exciting stuff yet. Even with this explanation, Flash was unimpressed by the fact that Empty Void escaped, and Blast did not have a defense for that. Flashy Flash scoffed. He figured that Blast hesitated because the two of them were partners. He was disappointed to learn that the #1 S-Class hero was so soft. That was enough to change his mind. Flashy Flash decided that he didn't need Blast. He planned on hunting God on his own. And this talk about being soft and hesitating against a former friend is bound to catch up to Flashy Flash at some point with Speedo Sound Sonic. But for now, Flash boldly told Blast to stay out of his way. Breaking the tension a bit, Saitama asked Blast what he wanted to do about his partner. And again, he referred to him as Old Dude, which is pretty funny because that's what young characters usually call Saitama. It's easy to forget since he's bald, but Saitama is only 25 years old. Blast began to answer the bald hero's question, but was interrupted by an announcement. A female voice informed Sitch that they were ready to commence the experiment. Saitama and Flash wondered what was going on. Blast then asked if they wanted to watch. This was actually why he returned to their dimension in the first place. Looking through the glass, they were able to see a few restrained humanoid monsters. In the next moment, the experiment began. The trio of monsters were subjected to a terrible surge of pain. Saitama and Sitch covered their ears while trying to communicate. The association was attempting to separate monster cells from the test subjects. Sitch mentioned that Saitama should have seen these guys on the news. They were fighters who were turned into monsters at the Super Fight Martial Arts Tournament. They became candidates for this experiment due to their resilience. Saitama didn't see this story on the news, and that's because he was actually a participant in the very same tournament. He was disguised as Bang's student Charanko. But back then, Saitama couldn't even recognize a monsterized Bakuzan who he'd faced only a few minutes before. So there's no way he'd remember these guys. Benpatsu's 3 eyes were on the verge of falling out of his face. One of the scientists shouted that the brain activity and heart rates of their subjects were unstable. They were in the danger zone. Hearing this, Sitch immediately told her to turn it off. After that, Benpatsu and Volton collapsed and were foaming from the mouth. Seeing this, Monoko started freaking out, exclaiming that she was never human to begin with. She really didn't want them to do the same thing to her. Saitama stopped the little monster from running away and said that they wouldn't. Now, this segment is made a lot shorter than it was before. In the original version, we learned that Monoko is actually an offshoot of the Monster Association's late proxy leader, Gyoro Gyoro. I think that was really interesting, so I hope we manage to explore that at another time. Flashy Flash narrowed his eyes and declared the experiment to be a failure. But just then, a monstrous hand grabbed hold of the platform. This was Hamukichi, and in this version, he's been thoroughly charged to the point of being less recognizable. The man-turned-monster began strapping himself into the device yet again. He begged them to please continue the experiment. Everyone looked on with interest. The Bear Man felt tremendous guilt for willingly becoming a monster in front of all the kids who admired him at his self-defense dojo. If he couldn't go back to being human, there was no way he would be able to face them again. He begged for them to keep testing him. Sitch nodded his approval, and it was reciprocated. The horrible pain continued on. The lead scientist was shocked. The separation of monster cells had begun. These were promising results. Soon after, Hamukichi was taken away on a stretcher like burnt toast on a plate. Sitch noticed the connection between these results and Bang's report, that the key to undoing monsterization lies in the subject's psychological state, which he was able to learn through Garo. Saitama and Blast shared a smile when the Baldy realized that Blast wanted to turn his partner back into a human. Blast looked over with a slightly more sympathetic expression. Shifting his attention back to the glass, Flash mentioned how you couldn't even tell if there was any humanity left in them. Even after all this, the best they could really do was pray for success. Flash turned to Blast again and wondered if that man was even the sort of guy who could be taken alive in the first place. And even if he is, who's to say that God doesn't just forfeit his power, killing him in the process? But before he could respond, Blast sensed something terrible. He instinctually summoned his power while shouting with concern. Saitama and Sitch didn't know what was going on. Blast slammed his fists together to form the symbol of infinity. In the next instant, the entire mega-sized Hero Association complex was encased within a dimensional dome of power. A colossal warp portal could be observed from a tremendous distance away. Just as a fissure began to cleave in the very same direction, Hero Association headquarters was gone. The entire bustling complex had been taken to a different dimension. In a fraction of a second, rupturing earthly slashes centered on the spot where the small city once resided. Seconds later, the mega structure returned. The land that had been thoroughly cratered by Tatsumaki's fight against Saitama now favored sliced blocks of cheese. Headquarters slammed back into place with shattering force. Then another, much smaller dimensional portal appeared at its highest point. From it emerged Blast, Flash, Monaco, Sitch, and Saitama. Flash couldn't believe what had happened to the surrounding landscape. Monaco and Sitch were of course panicking, while Saitama noticed that pretty much everyone inside the many buildings were having similar reactions. Blast was calm now. He let them know that this was a result of Empty Void's Dimension Blade. It is now clear that his partner has fully recovered. He figured that this was the ultimate ninja's way of greeting them. Sitch was at his wit's end, trying to figure out how they deal with something like this. Flashy Flash was having a hard time speaking. He struggled to comprehend that this Dimension Blade was one of Batman's techniques. For comparison, his Flashy Slash is only strong enough to destroy a stone bridge. But Blast did not stutter at all with his confirmation. This is a scale of power that they are dealing with. And at that, a cold sweat went down Flashy Flash's face. Understand that for Blast to panic this much, Hero Headquarters just barely avoided total destruction. For context, back when Boros and the Dark Matter Thieves totally annihilated a city with a single attack, Headquarters was the only thing left standing. And since then, they spent tens of millions of dollars to have Metal Knight improve their defenses even more. But of course, Saitama was just as casual as Blast. He wondered if the old guy believed he could win. To that, Blast's answer wasn't nearly as definitive. However, he planned on figuring it out one way or another. After all, it's not like he's been messing around these past 15 years. Flashy Flash was still struggling to process all of this madness. At the same time, Saitama looked out and said that something looked like Tatsumaki's. Now, I'm not sure if this means Tatsumaki is approaching or on her way. Of course, that would be huge for many reasons. I mean, Blast is already here. She hasn't had a chance to properly interact with him since he saved her as a little kid. But this could also be Saitama comparing the Dimension Blade's destruction to that of Tatsumaki's. Admittedly, Saitama is pretty terrible when it comes to scaling the powers of others, but this greeting from history's strongest ninja seems to be a lot more destructive than she was during their fight. However, during the Monster Association arc, I'd argue that she did even worse to the landscape. But because this appears to have been a simple attack for that man, and even Blast isn't totally assured of his own victory, this guy is very strong. He is definitely much stronger than we were led to believe with the previous version. And we are so back! The One Punch Man hype is real! This is the content we all want to see. Please, in the comments, let me know what you guys think about this new direction because I am over the moon right now. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.